The Oscars are far from perfect. Over the years, the organization has made its fair share of mistakes. But just what are the Academy's greatest slip-ups? Well, instead of going for the obvious low-hanging fruit, like the number of times they quote-unquote missed the boat in Best Picture, I wanted to talk about what I consider to be a relatively undiscussed aspect of the Oscars: the rescinded nominations. The films that got Oscar nominations, but then they were taken away. However, why were those films rescinded? And more importantly, what can they tell us about the Academy as a whole? Well, that's what I'm here to discuss. Maybe. In this video, I'm going to go over examples of rescinded Oscar nominations. From the accidental, to the films that cheated their way to the top, to the whole grand poobah. These are the Academy Award nominations that got thrown in the trash. To start, let's answer the important question: how does a movie even qualify for an Academy Award in the first place? For a feature film to qualify for a major Oscar category, like Best Picture or Best Actor, it has to be theatrically released in America between January 1st and December 31st. If the studio plans on having the film go wide in January, it must have a qualifying release in at least one of 6 metro areas, which includes Los Angeles County and New York City. In 1969, Alex Grasshoff's band concert documentary Young Americans made history when it became the first, and to date, only film to have its Academy Award win rescinded. Grasshoff's film had premiered in America in 1967 and not 1968. Basically, it should have been up for the 40th Academy ceremony and not the 41st. One little minor date change made all the difference. Then Academy President Gregory Peck called up Grasshoff and producer Robert Cohen and asked them to return their trophies. Best Documentary runner-up, Journey into Self, would be given the award instead, notably making this one of the few times in which the Academy revealed which film was in second place in any category, period. Speaking to the press at the time, Grasshoff equated losing his award for Young Americans to that of a graduate who had just lost his diploma. Despite the scandal, though, Grasshoff would continue to have a successful career, even receiving another Oscar nomination for his 1973 documentary, Journey to the Outer Limits. Insert your do not adjust your computer screen jokes here. But Young Americans is only the tip of the iceberg as far as notable rescinded Oscar nominations go, and I'm about to get into some even crazier examples. To be eligible for an Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film, a movie had to be, for the longest time, A, submitted by the country that exercised the most substantial artistic control over the film, and B, be in that aforementioned country's language. But where do you draw a line with films that were financed by multiple countries? This is a question that the Oscars Best Foreign Language Film branch has had to wrestle with for decades now. 2 mixed results. Best Past Foreign Language Film winners, like 1976's Black and White Color and 1984's Dangerous Moves, for example, were listed as Ivory Coast and Switzerland's submissions respectively. But what those movies have in common, aside from the coincidental fact that they were both produced by Arthur Cohen, is that they were, from a funding and language perspective, primarily French films. In 1995, the last film in Krzysztof Kieślowski's critically acclaimed Three Colors trilogy Red received 3 Academy Award nominations, but was disqualified as Switzerland's submission for Best International Feature. Red was directed by a Polish man, starred French actors, and was entirely in French. So the Academy had deemed it unsubstantially Swiss. Conversely, though, in that same year, the second film in Kieślowski's Three Colors trilogy, White, would be accepted as Poland's submission for Best Foreign Language Film. This is despite it also being a co-production between France, Poland, and Switzerland. The Academy's reasoning was that White, partially being set in Poland and having actual Polish actors in it, meant to them it actually counted as a Polish movie.
That doesn't make sense.
In 2006, Following a string of controversies, the Academy would make substantial changes to the Best Foreign Language Film category. Instead of arguing about where a film was set or what language it was in, the Academy would nominate purportedly good movies based on which country had footed the bill the most. It's almost like they realized, maybe we need to actually get with the 21st century. But long before that became a rock rule, the foreign language branch category would arguably reach its nexus point in 1993 when Uruguay's submission for Best Foreign Language Film, A Place in the World, was nominated and then immediately disqualified for having been largely financed with Argentinian money. A Place in the World had been submitted by Argentina's Oscar Selection Committee, but was snubbed in favor of another film, The Dark Side of the Heart. The film's director, Adolfo Aristotarian, figured that since his wife, Callie Saavedra, who co-wrote and did the costumes for the film, was a Uruguayan, it should be that country's submission instead. One thing to consider is that up to that point, no movie from Uruguay had ever been nominated for a Best Foreign Language Film Oscar. For Aristotarian, A Place in the World's nomination had the potential to be a watershed moment for the South American film industry. And it worked, initially anyway. The Academy was tipped off about A Place in the World's dubious country of origin, and they investigated. Since A Place in the World was directed by an Argentine filmmaker, told the story of an Argentine rancher, and had a mostly Argentinian cast and crew, to the Academy it was, well, indisputably, an Argentine film. Aristotarian sued the Academy for breach of contract, but his request would be shot down, with Judge J. Andrew Hawk of California ruling in the Academy's favor. Aristotarian said he was disappointed by the results, but declined to press any further charges, as the case concluded the same day that the Oscar voting ballots were supposed to be sent to members of the Academy. A Place in the World's chances of getting back into the Oscar race were about as dead as a doornail, so why even try? To ensure that a similar incident to A Place in the World would never happen again, the Academy would implement new guidelines aimed at clarifying the Best Foreign Language Film category rules, with a particular emphasis on who produced the film and what country they were from. The Academy would also decline to replace A Place in the World with another film. The official reason given for this decision was that it would unbalance the competition, creating an underdog narrative for the film that took its place, which I don't even buy for like a fraction of a second. I think it's just as probable that the Academy was as much afraid of the hassle and potential further bad press that would come from replacing A Place in the World as they were with trying to look fair. But that's just my read of the situation. On a more positive note, just based solely on having watched A Place in the World, Aristotarian appears to be a very picturesque filmmaker, and I would be actually interested in further exploring his work. Anyway, in its earliest years, the Oscars had a Best Original Story category. This was done in order to better distinguish between a film treatment, i.e. a story, and an actual screenplay. However, as the process of screenwriting changed, the Best Original Story category would become redundant by the 1950s. The category would be discontinued altogether in 1958. Now, before the Best Original Story category went completely kaput, there would be two accidental Oscar nominations that may or may have not played a part in its demise. In 1954, the 1953 John Wayne Western Hondo received 2 Academy Award nominations. One of these was for Best Supporting Actress for Geraldine Page in her film debut. The other was for Arthur Louis L'Amour for Best Original Story. Hondo, however, was anything but original. It was actually an adaptation of a short story that L'Amour had written a few years prior, titled The Gift of Cochise. At the time, L'Amour was a short story writer who was trying to get his foot in the door as a novelist. So, when the biggest movie star in America, circa 1952, John Wayne came to him, wanting to turn one of his short stories into a movie, how could he possibly turn down such a golden opportunity? So, how exactly did the Academy mistake Hondo as original when it was explicitly adapted from a pre-existing short story? Well, when John Wayne and his producing partner Robert M. Fellows were in the middle of making Hondo, the two, for reasons that remain unclear to me, issued a waiver with the Writers Guild of America, ensuring that the film would credit Lamore's name, but not the title of the short story that it was adapted from. The Gift of Cochise had already been featured in a July 5th, 1952 issue of Couillards, a general interest magazine that was popular at the time. So, even though Lamore had received an Oscar nomination for Best Original Story, it was already kind of an open secret in the industry that Hondo was, well, actually, potentially an adaptation. Lamore's nomination would be discarded, but there would be no hard feelings between him and the Academy. Lamore would even be offered an Academy membership, and he would also expand Hondo into a novel to great success. Now, if you think this example of Oscar buffoonery is crazy, wait till you hear about the next time a similar incident occurred in the Best Original Story category. Perhaps not so coincidentally, it also happened to occur in the category's last year of existence. In 1957, when the 1956 musical High Society received a nomination for Best Original Story, the Academy's Writers Branch erroneously credited the film to Edward Bernst and Edward Ullman. Bernst and Ullman had written a movie called High Society, but it wasn't the High Society that the Academy's Writers Branch was looking to nominate. A year before the Bing Crosby, Grace Kelly, Frank Sinatra, and Louis Armstrong musical hit the big screen, there was a Bowery Boys comedy with the same name. The Academy's Writers Branch had managed to mix the two films up. Though, to be fair, by that point, High Society as a title hadn't quite been wrung dry. Still, you'd think the screenwriters could have given it away or something. The Bowery Boys were a comedic team of New York actors led by Leo Gorshi and Huntz Hall that starred in 46 movies between 1946 and 1958. The Bowery Boys were popular, but among critics and the industry at large, they were seen as bottom-of-the-barrel entertainment. For the Academy to accidentally nominate a Bowery Boys comedy, especially in a major category like Original Story, was seen as a real eggs-in-their-faces moment for the organization. Ultimately, the High Society screenplay snafu would be resolved, with writers Edward Bernst and Edward Ullman sending letters to the Academy asking their names be withdrawn and the nomination be discarded. Wow, people actually being cordial. What a weird concept. Ironically, if the Academy had just done their homework, the screenplay mix-up wouldn't have happened in the first place. 1956 High Society with Bing Crosby was not original. It was a musical adaptation of Philip Barry's 1939 play, The Philadelphia Story, which had been adapted before in 1941 and won James Stewart his only Oscar for Best Actor. There's no other way I can put this, but the Academy was just out to lunch with this nomination. High Society wouldn't be the only Best Original Story nomination embarrassment that year though, as Robert Rich, who won the award for the Bull film The Brave One, mysteriously failed to show up to accept his trophy. Robert Rich was actually an alias for then blacklisted screenwriter Dalton Trumbo. And to circle back to Hondo, the same year that film lost its nomination for Best Original Story, the category would be awarded to Roman Holiday, which was another film that was also ghostwritten by, mic drop please, Dalton Trumbo. I guess it is true what they say. Sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. Francis Ford Coppola's 1972 immortal crime saga The Godfather is considered to be one of the greatest films ever made, and a key component to its success is its haunting, almost operatic, sparsely used score by Italian composer Nino Rota. Rota, who at the time had worked predominantly on European productions, being best known for his collaborations with director Federico Fellini, was considered to be an out-of-the-box choice on Coppola's part. But Coppola went to Rota specifically because he wanted music that evoked the main character's origins, presenting Sicily as this nostalgic, far-off place that was Mediterranean and almost Arabic sounding in tone. However, you might be surprised to learn that Roda's score for The Godfather wasn't exactly original. At least that's what the Academy learned when they were informed that Roda, in the process of composing the music to The Godfather, had deliberately culled a few preceding tracks for a score from an obscure 1958 Italian film called Fortunella. In particular, the music that plays during the film's key Sicilian sequence, referred to on the soundtrack as the Godfather Left theme, was taken wholesale from a huge portion of Fortunella's main theme. Fortunella was a movie with quite a bit of pedigree behind it. The film's director was Edoardo De Filippo, a respected playwright in Italy. Dino De Laurentiis produced it, while it was co-written by Federico Fellini and starred his wife, actress Giuliana Messina. De Laurentiis, Fellini, Messina, and composer Nino Rota had all previously collaborated on 1954's La Strada and 1957's Nights of Cabiria, to both great success and also back-to-back Best Foreign Language Film Oscars. However, despite the talent involved, Fortunella would flop in Italy and bypass America altogether. Rota, no stranger to recycling or reinventing themes, probably assumed it was fair game to keep as much pre-existing material from Fortunella in his back pocket, particularly should the opportunity arise to present the score to a wider audience. Lo and behold, The Godfather. Struggling to come up with a melody for the film's Sicilian sequence, Rota decided to pull out a couple of old themes, pass them on to his friends, and have them choose the most suitable. They eventually came to the conclusion that a theme Rota had written 14 years earlier for Fortunella was the right one to go with. Rota slowed down the Fortunella melody, added instruments like mandolins and strings, and it became the Godfather Left theme. Now, it's not like composers recycling themes is groundbreaking or anything. There are, after all, only so many notes in the music lexicon. And truthfully, Rota probably would have gotten off scot-free with his Fortunella self-plagiarism, except, one tiny problem. You know that mafia movie, The Godfather, I've been talking about for like 5 minutes straight or something? It just so happened to be, at the time of its release, the highest grossing film ever made.
I got a bad feeling about this.
Paramount was all in on The Godfather from the get-go. The novel by Mario Puzo had been a huge bestseller, and the studio decided the film adaptation needed, among other things, a cross-promotional tune to go along with it. Roda's Left theme would get a, for the time, typical music, easy-listening makeover. It would also be turned into a song titled Speak Softly Love, with lyrics by Larry Kushik.
Speak softly, love, and hold me warm against your heart.
The most successful rendition of Speak Softly Love would be performed by Andy Williams and would reach number 34 on the Billboard charts. However, this was apparently the crossing of the Rubicon moment. According to a couple of sources I read, including Franco Cicamino's comprehensive book, Nino Rota, The Godfather Trilogy, one potential reason for Rota's plagiarism getting exposed may have been because of Fortunella's producer, Dino De Laurentiis. De Laurentiis, who owned the rights to Fortunella's score, knows the similarities between that film's main melody and Speak Softly Love's, and allegedly decided to sue Paramount for profits. I couldn't find any articles to back this lawsuit claim up, so if it did happen, it most likely got settled out of court. The other, and more likely reason for Rota's nomination for The Godfather getting rescinded, had to do with the Italian Film Music Composers Association sending letters to the Academy informing them of the musician's self-plagiarism. As to how this organization found out about Rhoda's musical swipes, well, I don't have a definite answer there either. It all kind of remains a mystery. The Academy had the option to either keep Rhoda's nomination or to select from one of the 5 other shortlisted scores, one of which coincidentally happened to be for Rhoda's score for the 1972 Fellini film Roma. The Academy went with the later, and Rhoda's nomination for The Godfather would be replaced with John Addison's score for Joseph L. Mangiewicz's 1972 mind game mystery Sleuth. The Academy's music branch was in their technical right to rescind Rhoda's nomination for The Godfather. However, if I can play devil's advocate for a second, I'm just glad that Rhoda wrote the music in the first place. As a composer, Nino Rota was insanely prolific in his day. He didn't just write over 100 film scores, but also 10 operas, 5 ballets, and many other miscellaneous themes. There was bound to be some repetition. There's nothing inherently wrong with recycling a theme. It's how you apply it that matters most. Besides, we're comparing The Godfather to an obscure 50s Italian film that was basically a pain in the neck for me to even find a good copy of. No offense to Fortunella as a movie, it seems kind of interesting, what I could watch of it anyway, but there's really no comparison here. Oddly enough, perhaps in an attempt to ensure that the Academy's members would have to deal with fewer headaches, come 1975, not only would the sequel to The Godfather Part 2, be nominated for Best Original Score, but it would also win. This is despite it still containing the Fortunella theme. Nino Rota and Carmine Coppola, Francis Ford Coppola's father, would co-share credit for the award. I guess the Academy just decided there was no point in crying over spilled milk. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Before we go, I like to highlight 3 books that I read in preparation that were really helpful in gathering information. Richard Dyer's 2010 book, Nino Rota, Music, Film, and Feeling, Franco Sicamino's Nino Rota, The Godfather Trilogy, also from 2010, and Mason Wiley's 1986 comprehensive for the time, Inside Oscar. I think what we can learn from this video is that the Academy is not perfect, and it probably never will be. But it's fun and frustrating to chronicle such examples. Anyway, remember to subscribe, share, and hit that like button. Also, if you're interested in my reviews or my podcasts, head over to my website at dansden.net. Until we meet again, see you next time, guys.